Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give it a few more minutes and then we're going to start. All right, guys, we're going to start. So thank you all for coming to today's event, which is called Diversity is Inclusion, and it's run by myself, Sarah Megara Buckman, and I am the BPSA Southern Area Coordinator this year. So the hashtag for the event is BPSA SAC 2020. So I'd love to see you guys' tweets throughout the event, just to see what you're learning and everything. And we've got a plethora of speakers today, so hopefully you guys will get something from today's event. So just some housekeeping rules. I put microphones, but that's only applicable to the panelists. There will be 2 breaks throughout the event. So you'll see that when I show the timetabling for the event. And as well, there will be a certificate of attendance if you attend the whole day. So from me, I just want to say to you guys, if you have any questions throughout the event, please put in the chat box. There will be a Q&A panel at the end with our panelists, which we monitored. Like I said, use the hashtag throughout the day. It's the best way to network with the other people that are on the event because you can't actually see them. So that'll be the best way to network with them and also with our speakers. And also come with an expectation to learn something, take notes, and really try to engage in the Q&A session. So this is a run through of what we're going to be doing today. So I've done a little welcome. The first speaker we have is Amandeep, who's from the RPS, and then we have Mohammed. Then we're going to have a break roughly at 12. Then we've got Elsie from the UK Black Pharmacist Association, and we've got Nanina from the National Association of Women Pharmacists. And then we've got another break and a Q&A panel, and then we should be roughly finishing at 2. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Aman to talk about her work with the RPS.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got some slides. I've got the usual so many tabs open, so bear with me a moment. There we go. if you can't see the screen, let me know in the chat box, but I think that should be okay. So my name's Aman and I'm the Inclusion and Diversity Coordinator here at the RPS. I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to speak at the event today. Inclusion and diversity is a real important subject, which I'm really passionate about, as I'm sure everyone else, not just by doing this role, but also in the years that I've been qualified. It's something I've been an advocate for throughout. So I just thought I'd give an update of what the RPS are doing for inclusion and diversity as a profession, a bit about what does the terminology actually mean, and then how you can get involved and help us, because you are the future of pharmacy. So we need to kind of embed inclusion and diversity throughout. So we launched our strategy in June this year, but we've been working on it since last summer, developing it with members of the profession, both outside of the RPS membership and broader, and also with experts from different protected characteristics. So it's been developed, co-created for the profession, with the profession, and it's an evolving document. So as much as we've made a strategic outline for the next 5 years, we really appreciate that the current climate and how things evolve will determine how we take that forward. You know, when we launched this work last year, COVID was not even a thing, and now we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and rightly so, Black Lives Matter has become sharp focus, and racial inequality is being discussed more widely. So we need to make sure that we're agile and hearing what people are saying and what's important to the profession. The key thing about our strategy is that no one should be left behind. So everyone has got an equal access and opportunity that suits their needs, to have access to workplaces, support, whatever it is that they need throughout their career, because needs change. So like for myself, a month ago, I lived in London and I didn't have any responsibilities, but now I've moved back home and now I'm a carer for my sister who's autistic and also for my gran. So your needs change throughout your career. It could be a temporary thing, it could be a long-term thing as you come in. So we just need a profession that is flexible and willing to accept things and support you as you need. The one really important thing is about intersectionality. So we aren't just one protected characteristic, that's just a label that's been, that we've been characterized by, but we also bring our own different sectorial experiences, working from different areas of pharmacy, our own cultural backgrounds and the way we've been brought up, and our own experiences add to who we are. So that should all be considered in anything that we do, and to improve that sense of belonging. Throughout your work. We've all been in a situation where we have been in a team or in a family environment where we know we fully belong, where we can really feel like we can be ourselves, and that's what we try to emulate throughout our profession. But in doing so, we appreciate we need to tackle hard and difficult conversations. Some of the behaviours and the attitudes are systemic, and they've been around for a very long time. So for example, the racial discrimination and at certain attitudes to disability, we need to make sure that we're addressing them. And they are going to be hard conversations, which we need to have, and we're happy to have. And they have to happen for action and change to be taken forward. And in order to do that, we need to collaborate and be in partnership with other organisations across pharmacy and also outside of pharmacy. This isn't something that the RPS can do by themselves, so we're always looking to work with other organisations in improving inclusion and diversity across the profession. And as I've already mentioned, we need to be agile. So in doing this work, I mentioned that we started it last year, and we did a workforce survey, a membership survey, sorry, on what's important to the profession and how we're doing so far. So what we found was interesting. It was 83% of the profession believe that the RPS should be doing something about inclusion and diversity. And within that, then what are the barriers? So we've been told that disability is a big barrier to working in pharmacy and needs more support, followed by age, pregnancy, and race. And obviously since then things have changed, or things have become not changed. I don't think anything's changed. I think things have become more people are talking about race, and it's come to more of the forefront. So we need to take that on board as well and drive that forward, driving out racial inequality. And what we also found was actually your sense of belonging and your confidence in yourself increases as you become more experienced within pharmacy. So we need to kind of see how we can address that from an early careers perspective and from at the stage you guys are at as well. So how do we embed that from the beginning? And there are bits that we're doing well. So things like Pride, Women in Leadership, we have started doing some recognition work over the last couple of years, but we need to do more in other areas as well. So in terms of what does inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity look like? Inclusion is, so we've got diversity. So the profession itself, pharmacy is very diverse. We've 45% from a BAME, Black, Asian and minority ethnic background. And we are also 60% women as a workforce. So there's lots of diversity within the profession. What we need to get better at is celebrating that diversity and making sure that there's representation across all of the stages of our careers, plus up to leadership, across the board of that diversity, and those voices are being heard, and those voices are shaping the policies, the guidelines and the practices that we're taking forward. So we need to celebrate our diversity, which we've not been very good at doing, and embracing that. And then within that comes the inclusion, you know, having everyone around the table, giving everyone a fair chance to get around that table, and then having their voices heard. There's no point in being around the table if you're being ignored or just for the sake of it, for being a token. We need to make sure that those voices are heard. So we need to empower people and improve cultures to be able to make that voice heard and feel like people can speak up. And also that power of that voice. So the equity, if you notice that, you know, there's an underrepresented group, how are we reaching out to make sure that they feel more included and are part of that conversation? And only having those three bits means that there's a sense of belonging, that people feel that they can contribute and be themselves. We've all been in that situation, whether it's like in a project that you've done or a workshop that you're in. If you feel like you can contribute to the piece of work, then it'll be of much better quality and you feel like your voice is being heard, rather than someone else taking it on board and only doing their opinion of what they think it should be and not listening to anyone else. So we can all relate to that feeling, and that's what we want to make sure that we've got within the profession at all levels. And the reason why we wanted to talk to you is because you are the future. You know, you're currently it might not feel like you've started your career in pharmacy, but you definitely have. And you're emulating those behaviors now. And we want to teach those authentic leadership skills right from the beginning, because you'll be a leader as soon as when you qualify. You don't have to have a leadership role. You know, when you're in the pharmacy, whether you're a locum or the responsible pharmacist or in a hospital, you will be taking on that leadership role for your profession, for your team. So it's how do you emulate that authentic leadership, being inclusive and making sure that everybody's voices are heard. And in doing that, part of that equality and equity piece isn't just about making sure that everyone has the same platform, but and I think people say a lot, we need to, you know, despite the barriers that people have had to overcome, that shouldn't even be a thing. It should be, you know, there are no barriers and we need to remove the barriers so that everyone has got a fair chance without having to navigate through a system. And then there's a balance here between the patient and the profession. So our work is focusing on the profession, looking at professional development, authentic leadership skills, cultural competence, looking at how do we look at the undergrad course and make it diverse, having different skin colors at, you know, when you're looking at rashes or different languages, different religious considerations, and teaching that at undergrad level. And then there's the public health inequality piece that's been picked up with COVID. You know, why are certain groups more disproportionately affected because of their socioeconomic background or religious considerations or socioeconomic considerations that haven't been taken into account. So we need to have that balance, but there is an overlap, and we're working with NHS England and the APTUC, which is the technician leadership body, and across Great Britain as well, in Scotland and Wales, about how do we address that? What do we need to teach current pharmacists about being culturally aware and considerate? And also, how do you make sure you see that with your staff as well? And so, because once you start emulating it with one group, you'll see it with patient care. So our strategy is based on 3 strategic priorities. So one, we want to create a culture of belonging, and that bringing everyone in and making people feel that they can speak up. And then we also want to champion inclusive and authentic leadership. It is happening and it's out there. We want to be able to share that good practice and make sure it's everywhere. And then also we want to challenge inclusion and diversity barriers. And this is the bigger bit. This is the biggest bit, is that these behaviors happen, and how do we feel comfortable in challenging them in a productive way without feeling like we'll be considered a troublemaker, or making sure that once you challenge it, then things are in place to address it over the long term. And it's not just something that it gets brushed under the carpet. So what we've been up to, so there's a couple of things that we've been doing since the launch in June. We set up an inclusion and diversity action group called Action in Belonging, Culture and Diversity, which I would encourage all of you to join. It's open to RPS members and non-members, and you don't have to be a pharmacist, as anyone that works within pharmacy. And we meet every 2 months, and we focused, the first meeting we focused on race, and the second was about disability. And it's a great place to come and learn if you feel like, you know, I want to learn more about inclusion and diversity, about a particular characteristic, or to share your experience, and so that we can take things forward. And also there's always actions that are coming out of that group as well that you can always help take forward as well. We've done something called an inequality impact assessment. So that's looking at any product and service that we introduce. Is it going to inadvertently have a negative impact on any group or positive impact? And how do we address the negative impact? So it's thinking about things before we launch them, and seeing that actually, you know, is it accessible from a disability point of view? Is it easy to read? Is it more favored for a particular age group or more experience? So we're introducing that with our services to make sure that before anything is launched, we're being very considerate about how things are going to be taken forward, and any potential impact that it's going to have on particular groups. We've also looked at our board election. So this is probably, you're probably thinking, oh, this is like far away from my career just yet. But we want to have representation across the leadership bodies to make sure that they are representative. And when you see the pictures of these boards, you see yourselves in them. You know, I don't see myself in these places. So, you know, how do we make sure that they represent us, and we've got those role models there, so that we've got people to look up to. And also we're looking at how do we use the mentoring platform in a much more productive way. So if you've got any issues in particular to inclusion and diversity, who can you reach out to for support, and how do we get the more experienced white senior colleagues to reach out to grassroots pharmacists from a different background to kind of do a succession planning, and making sure that that leadership, the growth of the leadership, is making sure that it's representative in 5 to 10 years time. We will also been working with the UK Black Pharmacist Association in working collaboration to see what we can do for Black History Month, and also making sure that activity is ongoing. So it's not just a one-off, you know, we know what the issues are, but how do we address them moving forward? And as part of that conversation with the ABCD group, we've had feedback about what we should be asking GPHC, Pharmacy Schools Council, Health Education England, the organisations that represent us, to make sure that things are fairer and are considered. So that's some of the work that we've been doing so far. And one of the things that we've taken on board, and that was just agreed at our assembly, which is our governance structure, is that we are absolutely an anti-racist organisation. And I thought I'd just put this slide up because people will go, oh, but I'm not racist. But then what does that mean to being anti-racist? So, you know, are you comfortable with being uncomfortable about your unconscious biases? And we all have them. And how do we move forward and address them? Or if we see something, how do we challenge it? And with that comes confidence. I know when I was a junior pharmacist, I didn't always have the confidence to speak up, but, you know, how do we empower people to address those things? So we've done some work, and I just wanted to kind of highlight these things that you can go and read on our website. Again, you don't have to be an RPS member, but we've done some blogs on particular shared lived experiences. In particular, we've got Ruth Edwards, who's a lecturer who's recovering from cancer. We've got an older Israel, who is a pharmacist who came from Africa, and he decided to do pharmacy later on in his career, as well as with Ryan. And so they're just sharing their lived experiences. So do go and have a read if there's anything that calls out to you. And they're there on our website. We also did Facebook Lives on throughout Black History Month with a group of different Black pharmacists from different stages of their career, looking at different topics. So again, I would encourage you to go and have a look. You don't need to be a Facebook member to go to the Facebook Lives and to just listen and see what people are saying, and the things that we need to consider taking forward. So how can you get involved? So I would ask you to join our Action Belonging, Culture and Diversity group. We've got about 300 members so far, and it's a place for us to hear your views, to help us shape our strategy, but it's also a networking opportunity. It would have been easy, obviously, if we were able to do things face to face, but with where we are, we meet via Zoom. And so we do encourage people to share their ideas throughout the meeting. And we've also got a Facebook page if you wanted to go and network and continue that conversation through in the 2 months between each meeting. So there's lots of things that we can do. And I just wanted to run through why we set this group up. So we wanted to improve the profession for everybody. And it's not just, if you represent that protected characteristic or you have a certain experience, but there's a key thing about allyship. If you are supporting a particular community, that support is so important in driving things forward. Sometimes you need that voice for the group. The group can't always be the ones having to fix everything. So allyship is such an important part. So even if things don't directly impact you, being a part of that group, hearing different lived experiences will give you an understanding of where people are at and what help they need. And it's an opportunity for us to help each other and lift each other up and have those difficult conversations, because sometimes it can be quite difficult. So, at least you've got a network there to help you. And it'll help us enable us to know what's important to the profession, and having those conversations and ensuring that we're promoting an authentic leadership and diversity for the future as well. And it's an open, honest forum where people feel like they can contribute. And if you don't want to chat, you don't want to put your chat in the main chat box, you can always email us separately and have that conversation if that you felt more comfortable in doing that. So it's to make sure that we're all working together. And the idea of the group is that we also work in collaboration with networks that already exist. So for example, the UK Black Pharmacist Association, and we've got the Technician Association. So we want to make sure that we're not working in competition, that we're working together, because we all want the same thing. So it's how do we get all the voices and be loud as possible, rather than working in competition with each other. And so some of the things that we've heard, I just thought I'd give you a bit of an insight of the things that are discussed and what we hear. So we acknowledge there's a lack of leadership, diversity within the leadership roles, particularly from gender and race perspective. People want us to be louder on part of the for the profession in holding people to account. So for example, with the attainment gap with Black students compared to white students for the pre-reg, how are we holding the GPHC to account that they're actually addressing the exam and what that gap is and what they're going to do about it. We want leaders in the profession to feel that they to encourage people to feel like they belong. And so when you embark on your career, when you go and do your pre-reg and your first jobs, you feel like you belong in the profession, and you're able to bring your whole self, but also when you're leaders, that you're emulating those same skills and characteristics. And also there's a bit about reflecting. We all need to reflect and address our own biases when we all have them. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. It's just what we're going to do about it and changing our behaviors and raising concerns and empowering people to do the same and providing safe space to do that. And in all of that, we need to make sure that there's evidence and data, that we're measuring success, that we know who we're speaking to, and we can see progression happen, because what we don't want is to keep talking about it and then nothing changes. The other thing, I suppose a lot of this focus has been about race and gender, but there's that bit about flexible working. You know, if you're wanting to start a family, or you need a bit more flexible working because you've got caring responsibilities, how does your workplace support you in doing that, so you don't feel like you have to choose? And COVID has actually been a really good way of seeing how we can work more creatively, and how do we learn those lessons and take that forward. The last meeting we had was focused on disability, and we had several speakers come and speak to us about their experiences, and it was so insightful, things that we haven't considered. So accessibility in a community pharmacy, for example, for, if you're a staff member, it doesn't really exist. How do we promote that, and how do we encourage the GPHC to include that in their standards? How do we get better at sharing information about disability inclusivity to the employers, and what training and awareness do pharmacists need? So we'd like to definitely start picking up on some of that work, and supporting colleagues in taking those things forward. So there are some of the things that we've heard, and on the back of that, there's some actions that we want to take forward. So if we want to set up a bit of a disability reference network, so that we've got people who we can speak to with lived experience that can tell us what they need and what we need to take forward. We want to introduce inclusive workforce pledge, which is co-collaborated throughout the profession, where employers sign up to being inclusive and diverse, and acknowledge and demonstrating authentic leadership, and co-creating our policy asks. So I'm not going to read out all of them, but these are the things that we want to take forward, and being part of the ABCD group, you'll be able to shape those, taking them forward. And the particular things that I'd say are immediate that we will be working on are developing forms of microaggression. So, not all discrimination is obvious. Sometimes there can be little subtle things that you don't recognize that people are saying that could be that's racist. So how do we thought we'd have a form that recognizes what they are. If you see it, what do you do, and how do you address it? So for example, like something that I've had before is, oh, like, you're Asian, so are you going to have an arranged marriage? Or I get confused for, when I worked in a hospital, I used to get confused for the other Indian girl in the department, things like that. So it's not okay, and how do we highlight that to people and address it when it happens? So the key thing for us is to make sure that no one is left behind, that everyone has a seat at the table and is felt and is included and has a voice, and having that voice heard. So if you are inspired or would like to take part, please do reach out and join the ABCD group. And you can always contact me on Twitter, and always email us as well. If you've got any experiences that you want to share, or any ideas that you think we could take forward, we'd be really keen to hear it. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for that. I think it was very insightful. And I think what you said about the ABCD group is something that I would encourage everybody to get involved and be a part of.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Mohammed next.
Morning, everyone. I'm just trying to start my video, and it's saying the host needs to let me start it. So I'll let you give me that power, if that's okay.
Did you say your video isn't working?
It's saying the host needs to give me permission. I just got a message saying you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. It seems you have the power.
Okay, give me a second. Oh yeah, there we go. We should be able to start it now.
Wonderful. I shall give that another go. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can now see me. I've got no presentation, so I'm just going to speak, if that's okay. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak to the BPSA Southern Area Conference this morning on a Saturday. Normally my Saturdays involve working in the pharmacy, but I've kind of rearranged my days so I can come and talk to you this morning. So a little bit about me, and then I'll talk to you about the key area that I'm particularly passionate about. My name is Mohammed Hussain. I've been a pharmacist for about 20 years. I have a portfolio career, so I work in a number of different areas. I've started my career as a community pharmacist working for Boots. I've then worked in independent pharmacy for many years. I then went on to work in primary care. I've had a role as a lecturer practitioner for several years teaching independent prescribing. I've worked for the GPHC in fitness to practice panels for about 7 or 8 years. Then I worked for GPHC on their council for a further 7 or 8 years. I'm a fellow of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society and a fellow of the Association of Pharmacy Technicians UK. And I think that makes me just one of 3 or 4 pharmacists to have held a fellowship at both the technicians body and the pharmacy body as well. I'm currently non-executive director at Bradford Teaching Hospitals Foundation Trust. I have my own pharmacy, 2 in fact, and I've been running those for about 10 years. I work at NHS Digital for the last decade or so, and as part of that role, I kind of rolled out the electronic prescription service, summary care records, NHS Mail, all of those kind of good things technology-wise. You can either thank or blame me because they all belong to me and my team. So that's my role. What's my interest in inequality and the topic we're talking about this morning? I guess my interest arises from a deeply rooted personal experience, not just in pharmacy, but in my life. My earliest memories of growing up in Northern England have been rooted in suffering racist abuse, harassment, bullying. All throughout my professional life, I've experienced it in every job that I've had, even up till now, and I'm in a senior position. I've experienced microaggressions, sometimes blatant aggressions. So if you look like me, if you belong to the global brown majority, then you will experience racism to one degree or another. And that's what drove me in my early career to join the GPHC in fitness to practice, because I would constantly hear, particularly Asian pharmacists, because that was my network, complain about how the RPSGB, the regulator then, and the GPHC subsequently were biased against Asians, that we used to be able to read the sanctions that the GPHC had applied as to who was struck off. And quite often you read them and there were names like mine, they were non-English names. And that is what inspired me to kind of go and work for the GPHC. And my view was that I could either put up with it and accept that it is the way it is, or I could do something about it. And I chose to do something about it. A little bit kind of more personal information. My name is Mohammed Hussain, but it's not the name I grew up with. So I changed my name when I was at university because no one could pronounce the name that I actually grew up with, the name my family called me, my loved ones called me. So Mohammed is the name that's kind of true to my heritage, my identity, but it's not the name that I'm known by my close friends and family. And I changed it because no one could pronounce my name. And particularly when I was at my pre-reg, I experienced really blatant and direct race discrimination from my employer. So I'd raised it with Boots, the area manager. They were not interested. They just said you had to toughen up. This is the work environment. And my tutor during my pre-reg refused to call me Mohammed. She called me Mark, because she said Mohammed just didn't sound right, and she didn't want to call me Mohammed. So even my name wasn't my own; it was taken away from me, it was kind of one of the worst years of my life, that pre-reg year. But I kind of got through it and managed to qualify as a pharmacist. But subsequently thereafter, in every role that I've had, I've experienced direct and indirect race discrimination, and so much so that I have lodged in latter years kind of 2 different grievances against employers. I have taken an employer to an employment tribunal and succeeded, because I've changed very much from 20 years ago when I was a young pre-reg, and those kind of direct impacts of discrimination had such a profound effect on me that I recognized that I could either put up with it and stay silent, or I could try and change it. And one of the things that I've learned is that you can't change hearts and minds necessarily, and that shouldn't be our goal. If someone is being racist towards you, microaggressions or subtle aggressions or direct discrimination, I've been called Packy at work, I've been called Brownie, I've been called a terrorist, I've had people make comments about arranged marriages and gender inequality in my community, which exists, but to have it stereotyped, I think is completely out of order. Every time I used to go into my employment office, I'd be the one who'd be randomly searched repeatedly, and it got to such a ridiculous point that I would open my bag and take it out and say, look, just search me because I know you're going to. And most of my experience in my career is that I'm often in meetings where I'm the only BAME person. So I look around me and there are very few people who look like me. And that's extraordinary that in a profession that we are, that is so diverse. I want to just touch upon a little bit about the different inequalities that we have. So Amandeep's talked about what the RPS is doing, but I want to address why they're doing that, because this is one of the challenges I've related to the RPS and others is you need to describe exactly what the problem is, and you don't need to sugarcoat it. You need to tell us the hard truth because we experience it and we know what it's like. So what are the harsh truths around inequality, particularly in pharmacy? So there's a pay inequality. So if you're black and brown, if you look like me and our panelists today, then you will suffer a pay inequality throughout your lifetime. And it's even worse if you happen to be black, brown, and a woman. So you get a double whammy, if you like. On average, if you're a black or brown person, you earn £7,000 a year less than a white equivalent. That's the median ethnic pay gap between a black and brown person in pharmacy and their white peer. Know the difference. That's just the key difference. There's a representation inequality. If you look at the leadership of all our bodies, then there's a huge inequality versus our profession. Our profession is overwhelmingly female. It's about 75% female and has been a majority female profession for more than 20 years. So for more than a generation, it's been a majority female profession. In terms of BAME representation, we're about 40% BAME and as a profession, and we're on track to be a majority BAME profession in the next few years, particularly at the younger age groups. If you looked at pharmacy students, schools of pharmacy, it's a majority BAME body already. And that wave of diversity is going to come through into the profession. But you look at our bodies, if you look at the RPS, they've never had a black member as part of any of their boards in their entire history. And that's just appalling. The GPHC has never had a black member on their council in their entire history. The National Pharmaceutical Association has never had a black member on their panels for their entire history. In fact, if you look at some of these kind of leadership bodies within pharmacy, they may argue that they've had BAME representation, and quite often when I challenge individuals on this, they say, "Oh well, we've had two BAME presidents of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. Mohammed, you yourself have been on the GPHC Council, so how can the GPHC be biased? How can the RPS be biased? How can the MPA be biased?" And I think we need to unpack what BAME means. So BAME is around Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. And I'll come to that term in a bit. But what so often happens in pharmacy is that the Asian bit hides all other demographics within minority groups. So for example, the National Pharmaceutical Association has about 14 members on its board. And a few years ago, I took a picture of their board meeting and I tweeted it. And I got in trouble by members of the NPA board who said, well, you've said this doesn't look like our profession, but look how diverse we are. And I challenged them to say, well, you had not a single woman on their board. So there's 14 men. Also, of those 14 men, 10 were Asian men. So there's no black representation or Asian or kind of Chinese, Southeast Asian representation. And it's even worse than that. All 10 of those Asian men were all Indian men. So there was no Pakistani, Bengali, or any other heritage. And that's how narrow a representative pool that it was. If I look at the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, yes, it has BAME representation. All of that BAME representation is Indian representation. They've had two BAME presidents in their history. So Hemant Patel going back maybe 20 odd years ago, and Ash Soni in more recent years that you'll know. But they've never had a Pakistani, a Bengali, a Southeast Asian, an African Caribbean, or black member be president or lead that society. It's never happened. And so that representation inequality is deeply ingrained. And what I would challenge, I'll challenge the RPS, and I do it repeatedly, and I'll challenge the GPHC and many other organizations, is that they hide, I believe, behind that umbrella term and they fail to achieve true representation. And I'll also challenge, and I will say this, is that many BAME individuals who succeed, who have those positions of authority and representation, pull up the ladder behind them. They don't share it out. They don't create a pipeline for others. They take that position and they hold it. And I think what we need to remember through history, going back through colonialism and through slavery and everything else, is always that some of the greatest kind of people who support the status quo have been other BAME people. And that is true. And so when you see a BAME face at a board meeting, it's not necessarily true that person is going to be a good advocate for inclusion and diversity. Quite often, those people are the very people that are the blockers for diversity and inclusion. And rather controversially, I will cite an example from the RPS English Pharmacy Board meeting in June, where an Asian senior board member was actually making the case in their open board meeting that the RPS had to be careful not to do too much on racial inequality. That to do too much on racial inequality meant they might not do something on another area like disability or gender inequality. And people were agreeing and nodding to this. And I challenged this publicly. And I lost some friends over this because they felt that I had to support this BAME individual because they were BAME and they were on the board and I had to help them and I had to support them. I completely refused to do that. I refuse to uphold the status quo. If someone is BAME, but they uphold the status quo around inequality, then we should challenge it. And I think that's one of the key messages that I would give to you. Just because someone looks like you, doesn't mean they share your values. Does it mean that they are for inequality? A really good example, I mean, many of you on the call would be too young to remember Margaret Thatcher. So Margaret Thatcher was the first female prime minister of this country. And you would have thought she would have made real changes around gender inequality and gender inclusion. She didn't. She did the complete opposite. In fact, Margaret Thatcher got rid of every woman in her cabinet. So she liked to be the only woman, and she didn't make space for other women. And I would say there are many BAME individuals in senior leadership positions who achieve leadership positions, but then don't open the door for others. They like their limelight. They like to speak about it. They like to pretend they're representing, but then when in their positions of authority, they actively argue against greater inclusion and diversity. And I simply will not accept that. And I will challenge that wherever I see it. There's regulatory inequality. So General Pharmaceutical Council in its core role has inequality. So if you looked at, and when I was GPHC council member, I asked for the data around fitness to practice by ethnicity. And initially I wasn't able to get it, but because I was on the board and I'm vocal and I don't believe in just going along to get along. And I believe that my role at the GPHC was to make a difference. And I challenged and I got the data and I had the data published. And what that data shows is that if you are particularly Asian, so Indian, Pakistani, then you were far more likely to be sanctioned by the GPHC than any other ethnic group. And he outweighed the proportion of Indian, Pakistani people within the profession by a significant degree. And I've been challenging the GPHC both as a council member subsequently since I've left to try and make that change. And those of you who follow me on Twitter will know that I recently managed to get a change from the GPHC, which was that they would now blind all GPHC investigations at the investigative committee stage. So this is the kind of looking at the allegations on paper and looking at the representations on paper. And I challenge to say, why do you need to know what someone's ethnicity is if they're not in front of you when you're deciding whether or not to triage this case? Why do you need to know what their gender is? Why do you need to know what their age is? And I'm not saying this from a purely abstract way. I'm saying this from a deeply kind of personal experience way, because I used to sit in those committees. And hear these comments. I actually sat in a GPHC fitness to practice panel committee meeting where there was a case against a female pharmacist, and the allegation was that she had spilt the methadone, and then she had then asked the methadone client to drink the methadone off the floor. Because she was worried that she couldn't balance the CD register. And I was sat in this committee hearing where another panelist member said, oh, looking at this name, she looks like a Polish name, like an Eastern European name for this lady. And we know that Eastern Europeans can be very brusque and very kind of directive. So I think this allegation is true. And that is complete nonsense, because it's a complete stereotype. It's nothing to do with the facts of the case. It was completely to do with the assumptions she had made from what her own biases around what an Eastern European female might say or might not say. I've similarly sat in committee hearings, fitness to practice closed cases, where allegations around fraud have been made, and where that individual was an Indian individual with an Indian name, Patel. Another panelist on my committee made a comment about, well, we know Asians commit sharp practice. And that's got, again, complete nonsense. It's nothing to do with the case at hand. It's a direct personal bias that's being introduced into a closed meeting, and that's going to influence the direction of that case. So I challenged both of those cases when I was there in those closed meetings, and I have subsequently challenged the GPHC when I was at council and since, and I have now managed to get them to change their rules, that at investigative committee stages now, those people in those panels will not know what the ethnicity, age, name, or any demographic data about the individual is. All they can then do is assess that case on the merits of the arguments, of the allegations and the evidence before them. And we do this in the NHS, we do this in employment, so why shouldn't we do it for fitness to practice when it's so important? Obviously, you can't do it in a face-to-face hearing when you get to the final sanctions, because the person is in front of you and those biases can come into play, but we should try and reduce them as much as possible. There's an employment inequality. So everywhere in employment, and I'm sure a colleague from the National Association of Women's Pharmacists, from the PDA, perhaps may touch upon this, but I've seen it in my career many times. If you're black or brown, you're less likely to get the interview. You're less likely to be promoted. You're more likely to be disciplined. And we see it all the time in the NHS. In my non-executive director role at Bradford Teaching Hospitals Trust, I'm a real passionate for advocacy and for change. Now, you would have thought, if you know anything about Bradford, that it's a very diverse area. You would have thought that Bradford would be amazing at dealing with inequality. It's not. It's not bad compared to other trusts, but it's not the leading light that I would like it to be. And myself and other members of that board are working really hard to change that. And we know it happens. We see it all around us. If you look at acting up arrangements, kind of who gets the nod to act up in a more senior role without an interview, then almost invariably it'll be a white person that gets it, and almost invariably it'll be a white man that gets it. The Chemist and Druggist Pharmacy magazine a couple of years ago, they launched the top 50 most influential people in pharmacy, and 40 of those people were white men. In a profession that's 70% female and is 40% BAME, it is quite extraordinary that we still have 40%, or 80% in fact, 40 out of the 50, of the most influential people in pharmacy are still white men. If you look at all the senior roles, look at who they are, and you'll see that they are invariably white and invariably white men. And yet they're a tiny minority in terms of our profession. We touched upon briefly the attainment inequality. So I'm so pleased to see people talking about this. And for me, it's like a full circle, because 10 years ago, I raised this issue. And then when I joined GPHC Council in 2013, I pushed for the pre-reg pass rate data to be published, broken down by ethnicity. And at the time, I got real pushback from other members of the council at GPHC, from the Board of Assessors, from the chair of the Board of Assessors of the GPHC, who refused to publish this data. And what they said to me was, Mohammed, there is some differences between ethnic groups, but you can't make assumptions. We don't know really what's going on. We certainly know that pharmacy is no worse than any other area, and some of the ethnic groups are too small, so it's not representative. We can't make any meaningful conclusions from this data. So they refused to publish the data. It took me about 18 months of argument at council. And because I was a council member, I had some authority, I had some weight, I could continuously challenge this decision. And eventually I got them to publish the data. So in 2014, the data was published. And what it showed was that if you were white, then the average pass rate was, say, on typically a 95%. If you were Chinese or Indian, your pass rate was even better than that. It was 98, 99%. If you were Pakistani, it was less. It was maybe 85 or 80%. If you were Bengali, it was less still, maybe 70 or 75%. But what the real outlier was that if you were black, that pass rate was 50%. So if you were black, you were twice as likely to fail the exam than your white peers. And that is simply extraordinary. And for me, that was a bombshell moment. But I still had people at the GPHC Council, at the pharmacy schools, argue with me to say, oh, but the sample is too small, there aren't enough Black students, you can't make that assumption, you can't jump to that conclusion, there's nothing to be seen here, Mohammed, this is just errant data, this is just noise in the data, this is, you can't make any conclusions. But every year I got the GPHC to publish that data. And every year when they published that data, we saw the same figures. Every year we saw Black pharmacy students right at the bottom, and not by a small way, but by a very, very long way away from every other ethnic group. If you look at other professions, we see similar outcomes. And the challenge I had when I was at GPHC Council was to say, oh, but Mohammed, we can't fix society. There's racism in society, there's racism everywhere, we can't fix it. And so this poor attainment by Black students is nothing to do with pharmacy, it's society's racism. And it's not something we can control. And I think that argument has a little bit of merit, but not so much that we can't do anything about it. My challenge to the GPHC and the Pharmacy Schools Councils was that, but in pharmacy, you can do something about it. You can talk about it. You can look at it. You can investigate it. You can research into it. And I got the GPHC to conduct a seminar in 2016 around this. And what was extraordinary was we had one of the only, well, 2 or 3 Black female professors in this country, an academic who specializes in researching inequality from University of Bradford, giving us data on this particular issue. And while I was live tweeting it, I had the chair of the Board of Assessors from the GPHC tweeting me back to tell me that this was nonsense, that there was no evidence. I simply tweeted him all the citations from this eminent professor who was telling us that there was an issue here. And that just tells you that people in these leadership positions often don't get it. And when I complained about the Board of Assessors, a chair tweeting that this was not true, and that how that was at variance at the GPHC's public position, which was that there is a problem here, we're going to seek to address it, all that happened was this individual deleted their tweets. That individual is still in their position at the chair of the Board of Assessors of the GPHC. And that for me is, that is the problem. The problem is that you're not going to change hearts and minds. If you challenge someone, they might delete their tweet, or they might say sorry, but they don't change their fundamental behavior. And the way to address inequality is by challenging and by changing structures and systems. I know that's where the evidence is. The evidence isn't in unconscious bias training. Unconscious bias training is as likely to reinforce your biases as it is to address them. It doesn't work. Okay? So we have to challenge in terms of systems and structures. So which takes me to issues around the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and Amandeep's talked about the work that she's done, and I welcome it, and it's much overdue. But the only reason we've got to where we've got to is people like myself and others have been challenging the RPS to do much, much more. I've been talking about this issue for more than a decade, and for most of that time, it's been in the wilderness on my own. People were not willing to listen. In recent years, I've been pushing the RPS to publish the ethnic pay gap. They refused to do it for 2 years straight. Last year they did, and I welcomed that, and it showed that the RPS has an ethnic pay gap. And that's, again, quite interesting, considering that the RPS is based in London, which is a very diverse working population, and represents a profession that is incredibly diverse, and yet it isn't diverse itself. If you look at the leadership positions, they don't represent our profession. And then in May of this year, I challenged the RPS to say, would you please publish your inclusion strategy? Because you've been talking about it for a year, I'd like to see it. And the first response from the president was to say that we've paused it because of COVID. And I want you to just think about that. In the middle of a global pandemic, that we know, that everyone knows, that BAME individuals are more at risk. They're more likely to die, more likely to be maimed from it, more likely to be impacted from it. The professional body for pharmacy said, we're pausing all our inclusion work because of COVID. So I advocated, campaigned, because I now use my platform on Twitter and on LinkedIn and elsewhere, because I'm lucky enough, I don't know why people follow me, but I'm lucky enough that people do follow me. And I've used that platform to have a voice, to give a voice, not just for myself and the areas that I'm interested in, but to areas for others, the people who don't have a voice, particularly Black pharmacy students, Black pharmacists, because I recognize and I've seen the anti-Blackness within the Asian community, and I've seen the lack of advocacy for Black pharmacists and Black professionals by BAME individuals who look like me in senior leadership positions, and it's just shocking to see. So I manage, myself and others, Elsie, who you'll hear from in a minute, I managed to get the RPS to publish its inclusion strategy. And even when they published their inclusion strategy, in the era of a global pandemic impacting BAME individuals, in the era of Black Lives Matter, race inequality was the second priority after disability. And again, it's quite extraordinary. And then in June, we had a BAME senior member of the RPS say we shouldn't do too much. Now, if you don't believe me, and I was challenged publicly to say that I had misquoted someone, and all the RPS board who now talk about inclusion and openness and transparency came out and said, Mohammed, you're wrong, that I was mistaken. The minutes of the meeting itself quote exactly what I said in terms of what that board member said. And you can go and see them on the RPS members site. So the RPS is doing some things around this, but it's a long, long way to go. And we need to keep pushing this body to change and to be structurally different and to be more open. Even this week, the RPS has an assembly meeting, and they refuse to let members like myself join this meeting, even though their own rules say an open business meeting can be accessible by any member. And the president refused to allow me to join that meeting. And I had to write to the chief executive with a copy of their own rules to say, I am a member, I'm a fellow of the society, I have every right to observe a meeting that is open business, and I'd like to see it. And what I found quite extraordinary was that eventually I managed to convince the RPS that I should be allowed. And what was fantastic was that we had 13 observers at this meeting. And they were a diverse bunch of people. Actually, most of the observers were BAME background. And that was really good to see. But it's the most observers the RPS has had at any board meeting in its history. That's because people like myself and Elsie and others have been pushing for this openness and transparency. Because what happens is if you have a meeting in public, it changes the dynamics of that meeting. The people in that meeting know they need to watch their P's and Q's. They need to know that members are watching and listening. And I don't care whether they believe in their hearts in terms of inclusion and diversity, or whether they are just mimicking it or faking it. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, do they make the decisions that change inclusion and diversity? Does it change? Does it move the needle? I'm not interested in individuals' hearts and minds because it doesn't work. What I'm much more interested in is making them make decisions that give us more openness, more transparency, more accountability in those senior roles. And that's what we'll get by holding them to account in the public domain. And that's my passion for life. And that's what I do. I don't just do it with the RPS. I've done it with the GPHC in many years that I've been there. And I'll just tell you about the GPHC. My very first meeting at the GPHC, I was the youngest council member of the GPHC. I was probably the second BAME person, the first Muslim they'd ever had on their council in 2013. And the very first dinner I went to, another council member sat opposite me, a white male, and he said to me, Mohammed, you're only here because you tick a box, because you're the diversity candidate. And he said it openly, brazenly, to my face, in front of earshot of everyone else. I didn't know what to say to this. And there's a lady sat next to me, a white lady, a lay member of council, and she elbowed me in my ribs and she said, Mohammed, please don't let him get away with that. Say something back to him. And I was intimidated by this because I'd never been, I'd just recently been appointed to council. It was a huge thing for me. And I didn't want to get off on the bad foot. I didn't want to be the troublemaker. But I said to this individual, and I hold it true as a kind of a philosophy in my life, that it doesn't matter to me that if the people who appointed me thought I was a token. It doesn't matter to me that they thought I was a diversity candidate. What matters to me is I've had that position. And when I've got that position, I can influence change. I can make things happen. So in my tenure at the GPHC, I got the data published on ethnicity by pre-regs. I had the pre-reg exam date changed from a Friday to a Thursday because of Jummah prayers for Muslims. And there was no reason for it to be on a Friday at all. I advocated for the pre-reg exam to be moved outside of Ramadan. I lost that one, but I did get other wins. I advocated and pushed for the publication of fitness and practice data by ethnicity. I pushed for and had a seminar around Black attainment in the pre-reg exam. I pushed for and got the GPHC standards changed so that every new school of pharmacy has to demonstrate how it's showing inclusion within its school of pharmacy. There's a criteria now that has to show what they're doing about demonstrating how their faculty looks more like the student body. Because if you look at most schools of pharmacy, the student body is incredibly diverse, but most of the faculty is not. And I managed to achieve those wins. So it's about structures. It's about what systems you can put in place that when you leave and you've gone, that those changes still persist beyond you. They are your legacy, your change. And what I did then was, I then spoke to individuals who I knew, and I pushed them to stand for GPHC Council. So Amar Safta, I helped him with his application. I encouraged him to stand. Okay, Selina, who's on a GPT council as a lay member, was with me at the Bradford Council, Bradford Hospital Trust Board, and I encouraged her to stand, and she's now standing, and she's the first hijabi woman on GPAT Council, which is amazing. That should be our legacy of what we achieve and what we do. It's how different is the organization after you left? What changes did you make while you were there? What I see instead is too many people who are about their own limelight, about their own voice, about their own place, about their own media, about being the sole advocate. And I could name some names, and you can probably work out who they are, but these people have been around for 15, 20 years at the RPS, at other senior positions in pharmacy, and they haven't moved the needle. Today, they'll talk to you about inclusion and diversity, but they have done nothing. They have no track record on this. And instead, in closed meetings, they are saying we're doing too much on race. We should do less on this. These are the people who hold us back. And these are the people that must go. This is why we need a new generation of people like yourselves to come through and challenge these barriers and change. And what I and the panelists today, what we need to do is we need to move that needle for you guys. We need to make space for you. Our success would be for us to step away from this and open up the space for you guys to step in. Perhaps I'll just finish. I'm conscious of time. I'm just running out of time. Is that perhaps I'll leave you with just kind of a sentiment from Kamala Harris, the new vice president-elect from the United States. So the first mixed-raced Asian and Black woman in that position. She talked about, kind of as opposite to Margaret Thatcher, she talked about that although she was the first, she didn't want to be the last. And that should be our legacy that we try and achieve and strive for. And that's the thing that we should keep in mind. You're always going to encounter racism. You're always going to encounter bias. I encounter it every single day at work, small, big, sometimes I let it go, sometimes I challenge it, but it's always there. You're always going to see it. The key thing is, what are you going to do about it? If you're going to walk by it and let it stand, then other people will also experience it. I have 3 young daughters. I want them to be in a better world. I don't want them to experience what I've experienced through my career, which has taken a huge toll on me personally. But I've used that and kind of used it as a fire in my belly to challenge. And sometimes I hear from the RPS and others, RPS, Amandeep talks about the RPS being inclusive, but because I've been challenging the RPS in the last couple of years to do more around inclusion, do you know what the RPS does? They avoid me on Twitter. If I tweet them, they never respond to me. They ignore me. And it doesn't bother me because I know that I'm campaigning, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm campaigning, and I'm going to keep pushing. I will constantly do it. I have a platform, and I want to keep using it for change. And it doesn't matter to me what the organization is. It's not personal. I'm trying to make a change that's going to be long lasting, far beyond my years as a pharmacist, to improve life for others. So what I'd like to see is real change. Too many strategies, too many words. We need actions, and we need to see a roadmap, and all of us need to keep pushing. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you said. I think a lot of it resonated with many of us. I like the thing you said about when you're there, the changes you're going to make. And I think that's the most important thing, that once you've left the organization, what impact have you made? So thank you so much, Mohammed. We're going to take a short break and we're going to reconvene in the next 10 minutes. So feel free to go to the loo, to get a drink, and then we're going to reconvene at 12:15. So we're going to start in the next 1 minute. So I'd encourage everyone to be back in their seats ready to start again in the next minute. Okay, great. So we're going to start now. So yeah, next we've got Elsie Gomez, and she is the president of the UK Black Pharmacist Association, which was started in December 2018. She's a visionary Black pharmacist, and she has strong leadership experience in the NHS, and she's determined to be inclusive and tackle racial inequalities. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to present to you all today. To tell you the truth, it's a real honor talking to the new generation of pharmacists, because at the end of the day, you are the future, and you are the one that need to get it right, hopefully, to have a more inclusive profession. We are a very diverse profession. And I am a little bit of a pickle because I had a presentation, no PowerPoint, no at all, it's just about talking to you. And I had a presentation and I knew everything that I was going to say. And then Amandip and Mohammed come before me. And they have said almost everything. I mean, it's going to be a real tough challenge for me to try to follow these two. But I will try to do my best. So in the last 10 minutes, I have been trying to rethink what is it that I'm going to tell you. And I think probably the most, the one thing that I can tell you is about my personal experience. And I will tell you how it all started and how my personal journey has taken me into go and put together a group of Black pharmacists and form the UK Black Pharmacist Association. So for those of you who are wondering where is that name coming from, Elsie Gomez Campos, I was born in Cuba, the largest island in the Caribbean. And then I qualified as a pharmacist in Cuba more than 20 years ago. As soon as I qualified, I came to the UK. And I enrolled in courses of English, huge, I still have got a very strong Spanish accent, but 20 years ago, it was even worse. And then I went to English lessons during the night, and during the day, I worked as pharmacist assistant in Boots. From there, I went into work as a pharmacist technician. But I always had in my mind that I wanted to be a pharmacist. I qualified as a pharmacist in Cuba, and I wanted to practice as a pharmacist. So I put my money together. And then after a few years of working as a pharmacist and studying during early mornings of the day and during the night about just keeping up with my knowledge in pharmacies, I went and did the conversion course in Sunderland. And I came back, did my pre-registration and qualified as a pharmacist in 2001. And then I became a pharmacist and I started practicing as a pharmacist. In my earliest years working as a pharmacist technician, people used to ask me, oh, where are you from? I used to say I am from Cuba. And then you had these questions, people asking you these questions that make you feel really uncomfortable, that make you feel that you really don't belong, but you just answer the questions and try to forget about it. So I used to say, yeah, I am from Cuba. And then you see people telling you, oh, why do you come here? All the Cuban people go to Miami. Why are you coming here? What made you come in here when we are so cold in here? And then, or they will ask me, so are you telling me that you are a Latino? And to me, yes, I am from Latin America. But those things never register to me. You feel uncomfortable about it, but you just brush it off and you just continue working or continue with your day. When I started working as a pharmacist, I always believed that, you work hard and you do the right thing, you follow the code of practice, and you will succeed. And I always strive to be the best. I always strive to give my best. We are very fortunate that we were working as a pharmacist. You are actually contributing to society in a manner that few can say that they do that. We look at the people's health, and that is an amazing thing to do. And that is what I love so much my profession. We are embedded within the society. We are in the community. And but working and studying allow me to achieve things within pharmacy, allow me to go up on the ladder, but very, very slowly. I saw my colleagues, some of them going really up very quickly, and me struggling to go up. And it was always that uncomfortable position where you don't know what you are doing. You think the problem is with you, and you just keep trying harder and harder and harder, and you just don't move up. So I went up to becoming a deputy chief pharmacist, and it took me many years to do that. But then I spoke up, and I spoke up about unprofessional behavior and so on, and I ended up, believe it or not, being referred to the General Pharmaceutical Council, to the fitness to practice. And I lost my position. And it was a period of my life that I just didn't know what to do. I was like, how come doing the right thing can't lead you to a position where you lose your job, and where you ended up being questioned by your professional body? And then, I contacted some people, and then I became aware of, people that look like me ended up in front of the fitness to practice committee more often than other people. People that look like me being disciplined more often than people that don't look like me. And I started questioning, and I started, there is something that needs to be done. And I challenged the General Pharmaceutical Council. By the way, I never was put in front of a committee, and they wrote a letter to me, saying that it was not going to go forward. But I challenged them. I said, this should have never ended up with you. You should have thrown this in the first place out as soon as you heard of it. But this is the problem that we have got with the General Pharmaceutical Council, and I have criticized them more than once in public. I have written to them 3 times, and even so now they are going out and they are asking us to help them to improve the way that they are doing things. I think it's too little too late, and they haven't done the most important thing, which is address the problems that they have got within some of the things that Mohammed have mentioned before. So because of this experience, I ended up in 2018 forming the UK Black Pharmacist Association. And you are on your own right to ask why the UK Black Pharmacist Association if you are only 6% of the profession. And it's a fair question. Most of the organizations that looked after inclusion and diversity, they always looking about Black and Asian minority ethnic group. But when we formed the UK Black Pharmacist Association, we realized that my experience as a Black pharmacist is very, very different to the experience of any other Asian pharmacist. And I am not by any way saying that they do not experience racism. I am not saying in any way that they do not experience discrimination. What I am saying is that our experience is very different. For instance, if you looked at, like Mohammed mentioned before, he mentioned about the boards of directors of many different pharmacist organizations, you will see Asians. It may not be that you see a diversity of Asians, but you do see Asians. I challenge you to find a Black face on those boards. Go and have a look at the General Pharmaceutical Council, go and have a look at the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and so on, and try to find for me a Black face on those places. Yet when I put the UK Black Pharmacist Association, I have met so many talented Black pharmacists that it begs the questions, why are we not represented on those places? And that is mainly why we have put is only just for Black pharmacists and not for Asians. And regardless of that, the work that we are doing is of benefit to all, not just ethnic minority pharmacists, but is going to be of benefit to the whole group of pharmacists, whichever race you are, because I believe that inclusion and diversity is about including everyone. Everyone should be treated equally, and the race, if you look at it, is just another organ, and you should not be treated any different because the color of your skin is different to another person, or because where you are coming from. So we all should be treated equally. So being president of the UK Black Pharmacist Association, what we have done, we have actually put, you hear about, bringing a chair to the table. Well, we have made our own table. It's as simple as that. We have made our own table, and we have been invited to many different places that me as a Black pharmacist would have never been invited. But as the president and the members of my board, we are invited to many different meetings to give our opinion, to pretty much shape the way that pharmacists is going to be look like in the future. We are currently working with the General Pharmaceutical Council in many different pieces of work to do with like the further education of pharmacists. We are going to Monday, we are going to a meeting about the new strategy for the Fitness to Practice Committee. We are in different advisory group. We are working with NHS England, NHS Improvement, and the Association of UK Pharmacist Technicians, trying to work on the strategy for the being an inclusive pharmacist practice, bringing it into our profession. Recently, I met with Pharmacy Support, and we are trying to collaborate together. Pharmacy Support, for those that you don't know, is an organization, is a charity that look after the well-being of pharmacists. And this is something that we are very interested on. And when they approach us, I couldn't say no. So something is coming up in the future. We are going to be working together. So we are, as an organization, we are trying to make sure that talking about inclusion, diversity, is not just because of what happened, George Floyd or another Black man died. No, we want to make sure that inclusion, diversity is something that we talk, and we continue talking, and we include it in every single policy that we write about pharmacy. My vision is that we are going to become that profession where we don't have to write blogs like the one that have written in the past about denouncing racial discrimination. I want to, hopefully for you guys, you to be member of a profession where you say that I have been promoted because of my quality, because of what I bring as a pharmacist to the profession. Know that I have been not promoted because of what I look like, if that makes sense. So we will continue working. We are very fortunate that they are listening to what we are saying. I mean, Amandeep told you that we will be working together with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. I am very grateful that they want to do that work with us. We did an incredible amount of work during the last month, the Black History Month. And slowly, because I have to say, as a pharmacist profession, we are frustrated. We are doing, and the work that we are doing is going very, very slowly. But we are making the difference. I mean, I am not going to go through the things that have been done lately, because Mohammed was very candid and he was very open about it. And he's one of our main allies, and a person that I have got great respect, because we need people like Mohammed to speak truth to power. And this is one thing that I will tell you. It is very scary to speak up. Amandeep mentioned that when she was talking, when you are a junior pharmacist, because you are so busy trying to catch up with the coursework that you may have to do for your postgraduate education, and you just keep your head down and you do not speak up. You felt like I felt the problem was with me when people were racist towards me. And the one thing that we have got in pharmacy is that the racial discrimination is very, very subtle, but it's there, and it has an impact on you. And it will play with your mental health. It will play with your self-esteem. And if there is anything that I will tell you, if you find in a position where, and you will find yourself in that position where you are being discriminated, where you are not being treated fair, try to find someone to talk to. It's not easy to speak up because you will be victimized like I was. You will be victimized. And so try to find a mentor, try to find a person that you can talk to, a person that can give you advice. I didn't have that. And that is why, for me, the work that we are doing with the UK Black Pharmacist Association will be changing that. We have been in a position where we have been able to guide some of our members when they find themselves in difficult situations. And I mean, that is invaluable. And from a personal point of view, I just want to say that the work at times is really hard. I felt, some of the situations that have been talked about by our members make you sometimes wonder if we are a caring profession. Members, pharmacists that don't speak up, when they can see clearly that someone is being treated unfairly because of the color of the skin, because where they are coming from, we become part of that problem. As Mohammed say, because you look like me, it doesn't mean that you have got my own value, the same values as me. I have been racially discriminated by Black female pharmacists, people that have been put in position of power that you have known better. And once that they get into those positions, they don't have a care in the world about what is that legacy that they are leaving behind. They just become part of the problem. And we need people that have got the confidence to speak up. I feel a personal responsibility. And I just, during the break, I've seen some tweeters going up. I was giving a fellowship yesterday, and I felt, I feel honored, but when I was given the news, it was on the 13th of November, I received the email. On that day was the 103 anniversary of my grandfather's birthday. And I remember receiving that email, and then I was thinking, oh my God, my grandfather was a person that he has to leave a school when he was in 3rd grade to go and work in the sugarcane plantation. And look at me now, a Black woman, foreigner, Cuban, in the United Kingdom, working as a pharmacist, making a small change, being given that fellowship. It means a lot to me. But what it means to me is that I cannot stop now. There is nothing that will stop me. I will continue making sure that your future looks nothing like my past. It's a personal responsibility. I don't know how much I will be able to do, but all that I can tell you is that the path that the speakers that you have got here, we will do the little things that will make your future brighter. It will make your future like how it should be. And I am not bitter about my my past experience as a pharmacist, or the contrary. Without those past experiences, you wouldn't have the UK Black Pharmacist Association, or I would not be the person that I am today. That organization that treated me so badly, I am taking them to the employment tribunal. Hopefully next year. We have been on these things for 4 years, and hopefully next year I will be taking them, because they won't be not on my watch, they won't be doing this to any other Black pharmacist or any other pharmacist. And whether I win or lose is irrelevant to me. Is the fact that I will be speaking up. I will saying that what they did is inappropriate, is not on, and hopefully I will make a place of work safer for the pharmacists that are coming behind me. So I am just going to finish telling you that it is important, the work that we are doing. It is important, organizations like yours that bring up this type of conference and allow us to speak up and allow us to tell you about the work that we are doing and what we want the future to look like for you. You are, you are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Work hard, be the best that you can be, and believe me, you will have a beautiful career ahead of you because of what we are doing today. So congratulations, by the way, about putting this together. I've enjoyed myself a lot, and I can't wait to follow you up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elsie. That was really, really great. And I think one thing that you said, which was very important, one thing you said that was very important, and I wrote it down, was that we shouldn't internalize things, that it's important to actually speak up when these things go on. And I think it's really important that everyone that's attending today to speak up. Don't ever internalize things, bottle it in, whether it's to do with your race, your gender, your age, your sexuality, religion, whatever it is, don't bottle it up. And we had an event last week, last Wednesday, on mental health during lockdown, but that is not just for lockdown, it extends beyond that. Throughout your entire career, you're going to need to watch your mental health, because there'll be times where it's going to be impacted and things that you can't avoid, but it's the way you deal with it that matters. So that was really amazing. And also well done to getting your RPS fellowship, because I know that's a big achievement. I know many of us on here would love one day to also be an RPS fellow. So that's an amazing achievement and goal. So well done. Yeah. And with that being said, we're going great on time. So I'm going to hand it over to Naina. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, please let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But yeah, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm just going to show your slides.
Thank you, Asaria. This is Naina Chotai. Naina is the name. My full name is Nayantara, but most people know me as Naina. And it wasn't a name that was changed by my white colleagues. It's a name that was changed by my friends and family. So yes, I'm comfortable with the name Naina. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for me to follow on the past speakers. Everyone has been so wonderful and has so much to say. I'm probably very new to this, but I'm going to attempt and tell you what we are doing at the National Association of Women Pharmacists. Next slide, please. Okay, so my objective today was NORP, as we call it, the National Association of Women Pharmacists, is part of the PDA, and I'm going to talk about what PDA is doing as far as inclusion and diversity is concerned, and where NORP fits in, and the need to add equalities. And so I will talk a little bit about the other networks that are involved within the PDA. I will also talk about my role as the president and the committee members, and what our commitment is to the EDI agenda, which is equality, diversity, and inclusion. And you, as everyone has said, are the future, and would like to reach out to you and involve as many of you as possible in the work that we do. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so equalities, inclusion and diversity at the PDA. The PDA, as most of you know, is the largest independent trade union exclusively for pharmacists in the UK. And they've chosen to work on equalities, diversity and inclusion. So just to explain why. So if we look at any workplace, diversity means people of different characteristics are employed, which happens, and we've just heard from people working at the RPS, Mohammed talking about his role at the council. So people of different characteristics are involved. Although I know, Mohammed, you did say that there were more Indians than anybody else. But let's just hold that for the moment. Inclusion means that we're all involved, okay? So we're all involved in the work that we do, with or without bias, I'd like to add. But there's still going to be inequality. So we need to add the word equality, meaning that people with diverse characteristics, gender, sex orientation, race, mental health, disability, that kind of thing are all involved. And at NORP, we want to look at how we can give equal chances of success and opportunities to everyone. Next slide, please. Okay, so the PDA was very keen to tackle EDI, but wasn't sure where to begin. And you would have all seen the news that the National Association of Women Pharmacists was going to disband after a century of being in operation. At the end of December 2019, they were going to dissolve. So next slide, please. PDA decided to seize the opportunity and work with the then NORP committee so that they could actually bring it in within PDA. So our objective is that all women pharmacists, regardless of race, sexual orientation, disability, realize their full potential and raise their profile by being educationally, socially, and politically active. So the PDA then joined forces and launched this new network on the 1st of January, 2020. Okay. Next. So with the aim of also thinking about BAME networks, ability networks, and LGBT networks. But they wanted to launch the other three at their April conference, but as we all know, COVID took over and then this had to be done digitally. So we now have an equalities lead who is responsible for 4 networks, proactively tackling all the equalities, diversity, and inclusive issues. So those are the 4 networks, okay? Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, right. So the NORP network, as I said, is coordinated by the equalities lead. At PDA, we have 31,000 members, and since the launch of the networks, we now have 1,750 members of the network, which is 7% of the membership. The NORP network, I mean, the new committee was elected only in August 2020. So I'm very new to this game. BAME we're going to hold elections and the results will be out in December. And the other networks, the LGBT plus and the ability networks, we're going to have elections next year, but we're all going to be working together to meet the equalities, diversity and inclusive agenda. Okay, 3 elected members so far of the NORP committee. We've got the president, the vice president, and the secretary. And we all work in the field with our own sort of specific jobs, but we are supported by the PDA head office. And we still have guidance from all our eminent NORP past committee members. So next slide, please. Okay, so okay, next one. Yeah, my role as president and the motivation. So I'm the 48th president of NORP and the first BAME president. And hopefully, as Mohammed has said, and as Kamala Harris has said, hopefully not the last. So I'm of Indian origin. So I was born in Kenya, and I'm Indian, and I'm here. I've done my studies in this country, etc. But yes, I'm of BAME origin. And why am I doing this now? Hello? Sorry, Osario, have we lost the slides? Hello? Okay, I think I'll continue without the slides. Unless, Osario, you can get them up. Okay. Sorry, do you want me to wait for you to get the slides up, or do you want me to continue? Hello?
Naina, I'm not sure if you can see the chat box, but she said to continue speaking and she's going to rejoin.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Amandeep. Okay, so I've been in pharmacy for 41 years now. So yes, you guys are the fresh faces of pharmacy, and I've been around for a long, long time. And my motivation is to join now, perhaps because I think there's a lot of noise around equality, diversity, and inclusion. Okay. Right, so, and I know within the committee, I have got some talented committee members. We have a vice president who works for Boots and is very involved as a Boots representative. And we have a secretary who's up in Scotland, and she's doing a lot of good work there. So next slide, please. Okay, so what are we doing? I mean, we've talked about this morning about all the facts about women in leadership. I know lots of you have mentioned this. And looking at the GPHC data, 61% are female, 39% are male. When in 2018, Birmingham University conducted a survey, most of the senior roles in pharmacy were occupied by men. 64% were occupied by men. We looked at the data from GPHC in 2019. By this time, we are getting pharmacists and pharmacy technicians involved. And the male representation is 31% and female 69%. So as you can see, the women numbers are on the increase, but there is disparity in gender representation in senior roles. So like you've heard from the others, that it's very difficult to find senior roles or senior executive roles taken up by the ethnic minority or BAME responsible persons, but also women are very, very underrepresented. I mean, if we looked at the Lloyd's pharmacy data, just want to try and relate it to pharmacy world we live in. 26% of the senior roles are in favor of men. And this was 2018 data. And I don't know if you've been reading the Telegraph recently, but yesterday's news looked at how women were unrepresented in any of the roles. So, you know, there is a reason that we need to do a lot more equalities work around bringing women into the responsible position in senior roles. So what is NORP going to be doing about it? So we are looking to advise on family-friendly policies. We're looking at employment issues, you know, what is it going to be like for pay and benefits for women on career breaks, making sure that they have the opportunities to train and develop and to take up opportunities available. We're working with the Equalities Trust and leading companies to meet their obligations under the Equalities Act. We are supporting female students and recent female graduates in their career development. So we're looking at mentorship programs as well. So students, take note, if you need any help, any mentorship in looking at your career development, please come to us as well. And we will be signposting you to female role models in the workplace. Few and far between at the moment, but hopefully we will find some to sort of signpost you to those. We are looking at practices within the European Pharmacist Network and see what we can tap into and learn from them. So we're going to be making sure we have representation on that. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, the other issues are we want to work with the pharmacists and especially the women amongst us to meet their employment needs, okay, because the practical challenges that women face are they're the ones that need to stay back to look after the health or disability of a family member, so they have the caring responsibility. Menopause is a big issue. I don't know if employers recognize the fact that menopause can cause problems and that you might not be able to attend work at certain times. It is a difficult time. We want to help with mature students who are balancing childcare and other caring responsibilities. There is discrimination in the workplace. We've heard time and time again that it continues. And we want to offer practical support for those who are registering or returning to practice. So what are the actions that we are taking? Okay, so what we've decided to do is we're going to proactively produce women's health leaflets to raise awareness of employers so that they can provide support and encouragement to the ladies that they employed. I mean, one of the example that I've put there is menopause. Menopause Day on the 18th of October, we released a leaflet called Menopause at Work, and we wanted to call it Let the Conversation Be Started. So people who are involved, who are in management roles and have got women working for them are able to understand what this is all about. Okay. We want to tackle health priorities, as we talked about. Menopause is just one of them, but we will be looking and watch out for the leaflets for cancer, pregnancy, miscarriage. You know, how do employers deal with the problems that women have with miscarriages? What about IVF and the time that they might need off? So we will be looking at all of those, but specifically for COVID-19 and the pandemic, we want to offer practical support and guidance to those returning to work. Some of the work that I do, I work as an independent consultant to independent pharmacists, and a lot of practical guidance and how to make the workplace safe is something that I do day to day. Yes, again, we're linking with the Charity Pharmacist Association for it. If need be, we can signpost our members for advice and support to the Pharmacist Support Charity if they need financial help, any health and well-being issues. We do ask them to speak to the charity as well. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a big one for you, and it applies to all of you listening today. We want to reach out to pharmacy school. I think it's very important that you at this stage, the future of pharmacy, are looking at the gender-related aspects of healthcare. We are trying to target the final year students. A lot of the universities have the Athena Swan program, which supports gender equality within higher education, and we want to be involved with them. We have a list of universities that we are already involved with. If we're not involved with yours, please let us know. So what are the actions we would like to take with your help? We want to raise awareness of relevant gender issues to students. We are going to use a framework to identify the biological, sociological, and behavioral factors that affect health and healthcare of males and females and how they're different. So we want everyone to understand that. We've already seen examples from COVID-19. Unfortunately, it's the men that were affected disproportionately, but there are other health conditions where women are affected disproportionately, and we'd like to bring that to the attention of the university lecturers and the students, okay? So this hopefully will empower all pharmacists to understand their employees and their patient communities as well. So as you go out into the world of practicing pharmacy, you will then, as pharmacists, be able to understand all about these health conditions that people would talk to you about. So yeah, we're transferring learning from the Medical Women's Federation, which is very, very active with the women medical personnel. So we want to see how, and so we're working with them. We want to see how we can transfer any of that learning and bring it to our pharmacists. So we'll work with universities for the Athena Swan Awards, because if you're signed up to that, if you're doing well, as far as gender equality is concerned, you get a bronze award and a silver award, and it's a prestigious thing for universities. So that's something we're looking at. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So how are we going to be communicating with you? We're looking to produce a quarterly newsletter. Our newsletter is due to be out in January 2021. And we will be talking about how NORP is involved with the European Employed Community Pharmacists. We're going to be looking at the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women. We are going to ask women in leadership to write articles as role models for you. And we are exploring gender equity in pharmacy leadership. The next thing on our agenda is the International Women's Day on the 8th of March. So we'll try and do something nearer the date or on the date. We're just deciding on that, and whether it will be online or depends on whether the COVID-19 vaccine works. Hopefully it will, and we can all meet face to face. Next slide, please. Okay, lastly but not least, we need your involvement. We need your involvement at your stage in the career as a student. We want you to raise awareness of equality, diversity, and inclusiveness within your student groups and networks. We want you to raise questions to us using the email or Twitter and Instagram, we are going to be launching a Facebook group. We're very young as a new committee. As you see, we've only just started towards the end of August. Please suggest topics for us to cover at conferences, at International Women's Day. If you have a role model yourself and you would like to suggest as a speaker, we can invite them to come to either the International Women's Day or to write in an article within our newsletter. Please, if you are aware that you haven't heard from anybody from NORP to deliver gender-related aspects of healthcare, we would be very interested, and we'll try and follow that up with your university. And if your university hasn't signed up to the Athena Swan Award, please encourage them. And if you want us to, we will write to them with what's involved and what needs to be done. Next slide, please. I'm nearing to the end of my talk. I just wanted to make you aware that as pharmacy students, you get free membership of the PDA. And as women, you're also free to join the NORP organization. It's all free for you, and you can access all the resources that we put up. Next slide, please. Okay, and because we work very closely with the Pharmacist Support Association, we will donate to them £1 for every year you stay as a member. Next slide, please. And thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm happy to join the panel to answer any questions you have on the National Association of Women's Pharmacists. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it was one thing that kept recurring in my mind throughout was that pharmacy is 70% female, yet there's a National Women's Association, which many people think, why is that? And from the things that's been said today as well, you can tell that although we are the majority as women, there's still so many different inequalities that we are facing, which is a shame really, but that's the world we live in, and that's why we have events like this to combat it. So like I said at the beginning, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll just take another 5-minute break and then we'll come back, and if there's any questions, we'll go through that. If not, we'll end the event. But I hope you guys are really learning something, because I've learned so much from today and just learning about the different things that are going on. And there's so many things as students as well to get involved in. There's the UK BPA if you're a Black pharmacy student. There's the RPS ABCD group as well to have your voice heard. And there's also the National Association of Women Pharmacists if you're a female. So there's so many things to get involved in, and don't limit yourself as you're going for your pharmacy degree. Be a part of the BPSA, be a part of all these organizations to really get involved in inclusion and diversity, because this is what our profession is. It's diverse, but we're building for inclusion. So with that being said, we're going to have a 5-minute break. So we're going to come back at, let's say, 1:05, so 4-minute break. So 1:05, and then if there's any questions, we will answer that from our panelists. Thank you guys so much. Okay, cool. So if there's any questions, please feel free to put in the Q&A part or in the chat. So our panelists can answer them. Okay, so I've got a question for Mohammed. And the question was, okay, I'll just read out the whole statement. The individual said, I was very happy to see you're in touch with the issue of the term BAME. Is a term I particularly find obstructive and destructive. My question is, how can we as future pharmacists tackle this issue? Is there anything that can be done? I regularly advocate for the dissolution of the term and speak on it in every chance I get, but what more can be done? I think this was aimed at Mohammed, but I think Mohammed can answer, and then if there's any other people that want to answer as well, can answer, because I think it's quite an interesting topic, the term BAME, but I'll hand over to Mohammed first, and then.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether Diana's going to like my response to this, because although I think the term BAME is problematic, I haven't been able to find an alternative term that is better. So there are at least 3 other terms out there that have been proposed as alternatives to the word BAME. I think particularly the issue with BAME is that it's used as a noun, and I think that becomes a particular problem with it. The alternative terms are BIPOC, so BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, People of Colour. There's PERM, which is people experiencing racism, which is probably the one I prefer the most, I think. And there's also People of Colour. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter which term you have, because whichever term you take, it's the way the term is used, I think, is the problem. And if it's used as an umbrella term, but then it's used as a way of closing down diversity rather than encapsulating diversity, then almost, regardless of whichever term you have, you'll encounter the same problem. So as I was talking earlier about when we look at BAME representation, and quite often what that means is that, certainly in pharmacy, it's South Asian and particularly Indian, and therefore it doesn't matter what term you have. If you use whatever umbrella term you choose in that way, then you've got that problem. And I think that is the key issue for me. I think the argument for dissolution has merit. I think I said this yesterday when I was on the Black Pharmacist Initiative talk last night, that I have lots of sympathy for it. I don't necessarily like the term, but I haven't found an alternative that's better. And I think it's more the way the term is used rather than whatever term that we might have in and of itself. And also, I think the challenge that we have is that we can spend a lot of energy trying to tackle what term it is. And I think some of the people who enable bias and inequality are quite happy for us to have this side argument around BAME, BIPOC, people of colour. And that means they don't have to focus on the key inequality itself. And in fact, what's interesting, I find, is that I've seen a lot of individuals and organisations who I wouldn't necessarily say are allies promoting this debate. And for me, it's a distraction from the key issue. The key issue is the inequality itself, not the term that we use. And we shouldn't get distracted along the main issue around tackling inequality.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Naina. How to say that correctly? Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to you. What's your views on this?
Well, I actually agree with Mohammed. We don't want to be sidetracked into debating something that's not really important. Using colour is a no-no, because that's something that the equalities agenda has said we can't use the word colour. So I kind of like BAME because it does cover everything that we want to cover. Yes, and let's not move away from the equalities agenda.
Okay, thank you. Elsie or Aman, do you guys want to speak on that?
Yes, I mean, I think the term is to me is very, very important. In part, I agree that let's not get going on and on and on about it. Something needs to be called, and my problem is the way that it's being used. For instance, when you have to tick a box, like when now we are talking about inclusive representative boards of the population that they represent. So if you are going to the NHS, if you are going to any pharmacist organization, and they will tick the box that they are inclusive because they have got an Asian person in there. So they use like BME yes, we tick that box. But my problem is that when you tick that box, it's always being ticked when you have got an Asian person in there. So Black people are being included in there when we are actually excluded, totally excluded. So my problem is the way that it's being used. And when we are going to start talking about inclusive, we need to talk about inclusivity of Black, Asians, all of them. So you cannot talk about the pharmacist profession being inclusive and that they both represent the members when you do not have a Black person in there. And that is my problem with that terminology. You can call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to go on about it, but it's about the way that we are using it and how organizations are getting away with being exclusive by using that term.
Okay, I'm gonna hand it back over to Naina because she had a hand raised. So, did you want to add something on?
Yes, I just want to say I agree with Elsie that yes, you know, they'll use it to say that we have a BAME representative. However, the data that's collected by the NHS or any employing organization isn't just asking you, are you BAME? They're asking you exactly what nationality you are, etc. So it does ask you, are you a British Indian, a British Asian, that kind of thing. So I think they're beginning to collect the right data, but yes, they probably will use it to say, yes, we've got one person from the BAME background and therefore we're all inclusive, but it may not necessarily be this. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to give it over to Aman as well.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said, especially about how we use it. So I think that because whatever term you use, it's always going to be the other, isn't it? It's always othering a group. But so what we've done at the RPS to avoid that debate about what do we do instead is always dismantle it. So always say Black and Asian and minority ethnic. And I mean, I'm not saying that goes far enough at all, but it's a start. And so at least we're breaking it down so that, you know, we're thinking about what that term, what the umbrella term is trying to cover. And I think it's almost an element of some people are not comfortable in using certain words. So like even the word Black, some people are really uncomfortable in saying Black pharmacist or Black. So I think it's there to protect themselves, but it's how do we empower people to be comfortable in acknowledging that it's okay. And so we've started to unpack that term, and we're not going to use an acronym anymore, and just always say it as it is.
I like that. I think that's a good response to obviously break it down. I think what Elsie said is very important as well, though, where she made the point about because the Black has kind of been missed out. I think that's the reason why many people actually have the problem with the term, because like all of you have said, at the end of the day, there's always going to be the white and the other. So it doesn't really matter the name that is there. It's just a matter of making sure that all people in that group are represented in one way or another, rather than just having one person who actually doesn't represent everyone. And I think Mohammed said it when he was speaking earlier about how sometimes you have that one person who's the face of the BAME people in the organization, but they're actually being counterproductive towards BAME people. So I think that's the general conclusion. Hopefully that answers your question, Adana, about the term. I think it's just not it's not something we should kill ourselves over, but I think there's more important issues as well. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. She said yes, thanks. Great. Another question we got was, I know that the RPS have a mentoring scheme. If you want to be a mentor or mentee, but there's one specific, let me read it again. I know that the RPS have a mentoring scheme if you want to be a mentor or a mentee, but is there one specific for BAME pharmacists where we can support each other more directly? So I think that's to Aman.
So the RPS platform is for everybody. We haven't got a particular one just for Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. But if there was, say, if you are a Black pharmacist, I know UK BPA have a mentoring platform. So if you were looking for specific support as a Black pharmacist, you can always approach the UK BPA. What we don't want to encourage is that only Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals approach each other, because there is something about that allyship piece and sponsorship from a white colleague that will support that mentoring. But if there was a particular issue, we've adapted the mentor platform to say, you know, if you've got an inclusion and diversity need, that's like a tick box, and you can pick out your mentor from there. And when you do approach an individual, you can always say in your, you know, when you ask to be mentored by them, that you can say that this is the issue, is this something you can help me with? And hopefully if they're a good mentor, they'll say yes or no, and you know, then you'll have to find someone else. But we don't have one specifically at the moment, but hopefully with things like the ABCD group and the networks that we've got, you'll be able to find someone. And I know I'm not meant to say this as an RPS staff, but there's always other ways of finding mentors. You know, if there's anyone you find as a role model on social media, you know, always reach out to them. People tend to be quite friendly and always happy to help.
Thank you. I'm also going to pass it over to Elsie in a second. I just wanted to add as well, from a black student perspective, you don't always necessarily have a BAME mentor. It's not a priority. Obviously, it's easier to relate to, but it's not really necessary. Just that the person can understand you and your needs and can meet that. I think that's the most important thing, because sometimes you can have a BAME person, but they're not actually helping you to do what you need, like the things that you need help in mentoring. So that's just a food for thought as well. But I'll give it over to Elsie because the BPA one. So yeah.
Yes, I mean, Amandeep is right. We do have a mentoring program, and the advantage of this mentoring program is like people are being mentored by people that look like them, but also by people that have been through similar experience than them and can guide them through very, very difficult challenges and navigations that they may not know how to do it. Saying that, I have been approached by several non-Black pharmacists that actually wants to help mentoring, because they bring something also to the table. They bring a lot of, if they're alive and if they are able to understand what are your challenges, they can help you a lot, because they will have connections. So yes, by all means, approach us, and I would encourage you to join us, and we will be able to help you with mentors that look like you, that may have had the same experience than you. But we are also we are going to be starting working together with non-Black pharmacists that are very very keen in helping us as well. So it's not just about color, it's about people that are able to understand your needs and are able to sympathize with you and are able to lift you up. And remember also about that reverse mentoring as well. You as a student have got lots of power in helping, you know, pharmacists that all pharmacists, let's put it in you know, and are able to tell them, like you teachers and you know you professors in the universities, what it's like to be you and how they can help you.
Thank you for that. And I think a key word that you said, which I wrote down, was guide. It's all about who can guide you. Do you know what I mean? And I love the approach that the UK BPA will be soon starting, like Elsie said, where they're actually going to get non-Black people, that's not really a term, but people that are not Black to be mentoring, because I just think it's important, because the whole event today is called Diversity is Inclusion. And although there's other elements to diversity, we're trying to be an inclusive profession. So never feel like you have to have like a Black mentor, you have to have an Asian mentor. Like, it's okay not to have one. But yeah, I think Mohammed wants to add on.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to just add into there. I think quite often we use the term mentor, but we're not always specific about what we mean by that term. And so there are three different things within that term that you can unpack, and you need to be clear what is it you're looking for. So there's a mentor, and there's also a sponsor and a coach. And these are very different things. And actually, if you look at the evidence shows that, you know, of the three types, mentor, sponsors, or coach, which one of those has the biggest impact on your career? That's a sponsor. Sponsor will always have the biggest impact on your career, more than a coach or a mentor. And so you think carefully about what is it you're looking for in that relationship and what's appropriate for you at that moment. I'm pleased Elsie talked about reverse mentoring, because quite often relationships can be kind of, I'm the wise, experienced mentor and you'll listen to me, to a more junior person in that relationship. But quite often, the reverse mentoring equalizes that. But if you go at it from the outset in terms of this is a reverse mentoring relationship, so it's a relationship of equals, as opposed to you've got knowledge and I'm going to take it from you, or you're going to give me that knowledge, then that doesn't work. The other question now, Mark, I'd always put against any mentor, sponsor, or coach is quite often people will give you advice that's self-supporting for them. So quite often the advice is self-advice. It's because I did this, then it should work for you. And also it's quite often it's a self-narrative for themselves, a story they tell themselves about how they navigated their career. It's not always good advice, especially for you when you're kind of a generation or 2 generations younger and you're in a different world. And I think always bear that in mind. Just because someone's a mentor or more experienced doesn't mean they're giving you the best advice. They're often giving you self-advice for them, which is fine, but you shouldn't take it unnecessarily on board. And the final thing is be really clear about that kind of outcome of the relationship. Oh, and one final point was around mentorship doesn't have to be singular, whether it's reverse mentoring or otherwise. You can absolutely have multiple mentors in different contexts. So you may want to mentor in a specific industry, specific area, but you may want a mentor that can help you career-wise, perhaps in, let's say, industry pharmacy or community pharmacy or primary care pharmacy, somebody with an experience and knowledge in that area and networks and connections. But equally, you might also want someone who can help you to deal with issues around self-confidence, around presentation, around kind of managing issues around experiences of racism and self-esteem. So there's different things to look for. We shouldn't look at it as a very binary one-to-one relationship.
Thank you. Hopefully that answered your question. I think we kind of went more into depth, but I think that was a good place to speak on. Another question that was mentioned, it says that it was mentioned as the attainment gap for Black students at pre-reg level. Is this also seen at graduate level? So before the pre-reg is taken? Anybody can feel free to answer that.
I can make a start. I know that the PJ did a piece on this at an undergraduate level, and that we're working with the Pharmacy Schools Council to look at that piece. And one of the things that we're going to take forward is looking at the diversity of the faculty that's teaching at an undergrad level. We spoke to the Black Pharmacist Collective, which is a group of undergraduates at Manchester University, and I have to say they were a completely inspiring group of students, and it just goes to show that if you put yourself out there, what you can achieve. But they told us some really good insight about that lack of diversity and the impact of that. So simple things like colloquial terms, in an OSCE, so there was something about a bookies, and that's another word for what is that another word? That's another word for, what's a non-colloquial term for bookies, but like a gambling shop, that's it. But if you're not from this country and you don't understand what that word is, someone spent time thinking about what that word meant and then distracted from the whole of the OSCE. So it's just thinking about what language we're using and looking at and unpicking why there is that a gap at the undergraduate level. So one of the things we're going to do is set up a diverse network of lecturers from the RPS, and so pharmacy schools can approach that network and see who they can get to teach, because people will be bringing in that diversity within that. And also we're speaking to the Pharmacy Schools Council about looking at their assessment processes. Have they done an equality impact assessment on their assessment process to make sure that there's no unconscious bias, or that they've addressed the negative impact on particular groups. So those conversations are happening, but obviously we need to make sure that they're addressed sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Mohammed.
Yeah, just a couple of things on that. I think the short answer to the question is yes. There definitely is a differential attainment in terms of the degree classification itself, but then it's all the way down. It's A levels, GCSEs, it's all the way through. And whenever you raise it, what people will say to you is, well, that's society, Mohammed. That's everything. We can't fix everything, but we can fix our bit of it. There is a real gap in terms of the faculty, and I've raised this, and I sit on the advisory board for a couple of schools of pharmacy, and I've raised this with them, and quite often the schools of pharmacy know this, but their challenge often back is to say, well, I've got these people I already employ in terms of staff, I can't get rid of them, senior lecturers. How can we change it? And my response, my counter response to that is to say, you need a pipeline. So how are you going to get your graduates, your PhD researchers, make them to lecturers and senior lecturers? You need a pipeline. You need to have a way of accelerating people through and retain them. If you've got a cohort of people who are, say, all white, and they are in that organization, well, they're not going to change for 30 years. We can't wait 2 generations to make the faculty look like the student body. Bradford University, in fact, have done really good work on this, and I've been working with them on this. And they appointed a head of School of Pharmacy who's Asian. And that's amazing. And he's made some really big changes in terms of their school. But there are other smaller things that you can do. So there are things about how do you hold your events. This is a particular, I think a comment I'd make about the BPSA. BPSA is not the same BPSA it was when I was a student. But when I was a student, the BPSA was a drinking club. And so when I was Muslim heritage, and not particularly observant, but of that Muslim heritage, I didn't feel comfortable in an environment that was all about drinking. And that's all it focused on. And so I never joined the BPSA. I wish I had that network when I was younger. And I've had similar feedback from especially Asian females, who externally will, not everyone, but those of them who come from, especially from a Muslim background, might wear the hijab and have that kind of external display of their faith. They would not feel comfortable in a pub for any kind of meeting. Yeah, yes, they can order soft drinks, but they don't feel comfortable, and they wouldn't go, and so they exclude themselves. And again, I'll pick on Bradford because I know it well. Is that I know that there's student pharmacy society doesn't have great engagement and traction with the student body because of the way that it's been led in the past. It's not been sensitive to the needs of their own community. So what you have to do is you can't just use what's worked elsewhere. So say what's worked in Newcastle or Sunderland is not going to work in Bradford because it's a different community. And the thing with Bradford, as an example for it, is that they get many students who stay at home. So most of their students, in fact, in Bradford are not students who are staying at the university, they're staying at home. So therefore, if you were Asian, it's difficult for you to come out in an evening once you've already gone home and stay until later. So if you're holding events and talks in an evening, you're just not going to get that engagement. And it still astounds me that pharmacy societies don't seem to get this fact. Instead, they'll say, well, they don't engage, they don't want to engage. It's not true. People will engage, but you have to find a way of engaging them. You have to find what the barriers are. I think that's what we need to look at. And then just a final thing about what Amandeep was talking about, just having this diverse pool of lecturers. I think it's a great idea. But my caution here would be, can we please not have the same individuals who've been lecturers for 30 years? Because those people have had 30 years to make a difference, and they haven't done it. All they've done is self-promote themselves. But what actual change have they really made? They've been in those positions of authority for 30 years and they've done nothing. And so I would, really challenge Amandeep on this and say, please be really critical about who you include in that group. Because what we don't want is the people who've been in leadership positions for 30 years and haven't done it, because they're not going to do it now. They've had their time and they've failed. We need new leadership, fresh ideas, and more passion for change.
Thank you so much. I think that definitely answers the question. And a lead on to that question, from that question, there are two, but they kind of link into the same question. So the first question was about how do we work to close the attainment gap? And then the second question, which is kind of like the same, but a bit more detail, how can students and people in senior positions as pharmacists or within your university work to close the attainment gap? Because for a lot of our students, it's quite worrying. With the profession obviously being, well, not profession, but like a lot of pharmacy schools being vain, like if there is an attainment gap, it's something that's like kind of hanging over our heads. So what would you guys say to that? And I think I'll go to Elsie first.
Yes, I just want to bring you to your attention. There is a blog that I think it was published in June or July 2020, which it wasn't a blog, it was an interview that I gave called "There Are Too Many Excuses Justifying the Unjustifiable." And I will challenge you to read it, because in there I actually highlight that, and I give some advice on how schools can actually address that, because of my experience Black students usually, or BME students, perhaps they don't feel comfortable raising some of the challenges and issues that they experience on a day-to-day basis. And after that article was published, I was approached by two heads of a school of pharmacists. One of them is the one that Mohammed referred to. And they were extremely interested to find out how can we make you know, our BME students feel more comfortable in our schools. There is a real interest from them to actually do that. But I think what they need is guidance, because as Mohammed said, they have called the same professors of the same academic staff that have been there for years. And they, even if they want to do it, they don't know how to do it. So one of the things that I will tell you, you know, we are more than happy. I mean, the UK Black Pharmacist Associations, we have coached 500 plus pharmacists. Many of them are very senior, and we can arrange for our members to give you presentations to the students and to the staff, and actually have someone from outside that can come and, you know, honestly talk about what is like racist discrimination looks like for the students. We have got plenty of examples. You need to start that conversation, and you need to start, and it's only by doing that then you will get a proper engagement from the members of your school to start thinking and you know, and actually thinking about, oh, what is it that we are doing? Like examples Amandeep have given you in the classroom. I am actually being inclusive with the language that I'm using. So feel free to, you know, to contact us, and we can start that conversation for you on your behalf with your academic staff and in your schools.
Thank you, Elsie. Before I give it over to Aman, I was just going to say as well, sometimes as students, we have to take the initiative. It's not always going to be, because the thing is, we know there's like obviously stuff with inclusion, diversity, and everything, but sometimes people don't realize it, which is what we call like unconscious biases. But they won't realize it's there until someone pulls them up on it. And it doesn't always have to be in like the most aggressive manner. It can just be like what Elsie said, like the UK BPA are offering to do these speeches. I think our school would benefit from it, stuff like that. Sometimes we've got to take the initiative because we are the future leaders. So let's start leading right now. Yes, I'm going to give it to Aman.
So just also building on what Elsie said and what I've already mentioned, there's a piece about you know, like, and also actually let me just go back a bit and pick up what you just said. If you have other friends in other pharmacy schools and you know that they're doing things well, get those good examples and take them back to your school of pharmacy and share that good practice. And, you know, hopefully that will work, because that's one of the things we'll be encouraging as part of our work, is sharing that good practice. And also thinking about the future. So, you know, the GPHC is looking at its undergraduate level standards at the moment, and we're having those conversations with them about how do we make sure inclusion and diversity is part of that. And I know Mohammed mentioned in his, you know, talk that he got that descriptor in there, but how do we build on that and make sure that it's embedded, and any frameworks that come up, how is it embedded in that, the standards, and all of that. So we're having those conversations as well in the background, and because one of the points in that question was how are we using our positions to do that. So we're using our contacts with the GPHC, and I'm sure, you know, other people on the panel are also having those same conversations to make sure that the future of any changes that are happening will have those inclusion and diversity things considered, so that it's embedded throughout, rather than like we're discussing now and having to bolt it on as well. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. Someone just said in the chat, Seb said, Kingston University have a great example of a diverse faculty and cohort. So if you have any friends that go to Kingston University, you can see what they're doing, and maybe you can be the cause of change in your university as well. So another question we've got is, what can be done to ensure that those who do speak up are not victimized at any point? And I think this is a really important question. So Mohammed had his hand raised, so I'll go to him first, and then I think everybody should just speak on this because it's very important. I think that's a thing that fears a lot of people as well, speaking out. So yeah. Okay,
so first of all, kind of speaking out about something takes courage, and it's an act of bravery. And unfortunately, although it is illegal to victimize, and that in and of itself is an action that you can take to an employment tribunal or launch a grievance against, victimization is going to happen. It's human nature. So this is why people don't do it. This is why people put up with it. This is why I've put up with it for many years in different places, and just accepted it, and kind of, either just internalized it or moaned about it to friends and family, but not done anything about it, because it's a big step. So I'm not going to diminish it to say, hey, go ahead and do it and you'll be absolutely fine, because you won't. In the real world is vicious and it's cruel, and no one likes anyone speaking up. And I'll be really blunt about that. In any organization, whatever their values, whatever they say to you, they don't like you speaking up. So there's always a gap between their values and their policies on paper, their kind of espoused values, and their lived values. And every organization I've been in, no one has ever said we will discriminate. No one has ever said we'll victimize. And every organization I've worked in, I've seen both. And I've seen it from managers, I've seen it directly, I've witnessed it. So whenever you take that step to do something, you really got to be sure that you know what you're getting into, especially if it's your employer, because that victimization can have a big impact on you. Unless you can get support. So, for example, the PDA, I've in the past launched a grievance with the help of the PDA. So having a union representation is really powerful. I would always encourage you to have your own representation. Never just be satisfied with your employer's representation, because if push comes to shove, the contract is held by your employer, not by you. They won't have your best interest at heart. So wherever you work, always have your own union, your own representation, your own indemnity insurance. It will do kind of wonders for you in terms of your own support. Also, have a link of networks. So kind of, the BPSA, Black Pharmacist Initiative, UK Black Pharmacist Association, any of these groups, have peers and networks that you can go to for support and advice. If it's specifically employment related and it's specifically in your organization, look for support within your organization. Is there a BAME network? Is there other networks within your organization that will be good allies and support you? If it's an event or incident that's happened and others have witnessed it, try to lodge a joint grievance. So I lodged a joint grievance, myself and a Black colleague, for events that happened to both of us. And because it was the two of us, I think we gave each other courage and support, and were able to fight it through. And in the end, we were successful. But I don't think I would have done it on my own. Just the burden of having to fight it is so hard if it's your own organization. So it happens. Don't do it easily. It's a really big thing. Sometimes you've got to do it, but try and find support that you can get from elsewhere. Doing it on your own, it's incredibly difficult. And you've really got to think, what do I want at the end of it? And this is why sometimes people leave organizations, because it's just too hard. Sorry if that's a bit of a downer, but it's a bit of realism.
Yeah, I think that was great. Before I hand it over to Naina, I was just going to say as well, like Mohammed said, be a part of a union that can represent you outside of your workplace. And not only that, as a student as well, PDA membership is free, so be a part of it. It's not just about if you get in trouble, but it's about stuff like this as well, because sometimes your university might not have the means, or they might not know really how to go about it, and there's guidance from people like the PDA. So I'm going to hand it over to Naina.
Right. Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Look at the PDA. That's what we're there for. We're there to support you. We can get representation if it is sort of problems with your employer, your universities. We've got the experts there to deal with it. So yes, like everybody has said, the PDA is there for you, and membership is free for students. Thank you.
Aman, do you have anything to say on this?
I think what the point that Mohammed made is actually a really important one. It is really hard in having those conversations. So I think the other thing is to also don't beat yourself up if you haven't got the confidence to do that. It takes a lot of even throughout just your career, you build experience and, you find yourself. So I'd say, if you don't feel bad, if you can't speak up about something straight away, but it takes you a few times, because, it takes a lot of emotional toll. And I know we are doing these roles and we experience it and we see it, and it is emotionally quite taxing. So, when you see something like that, and also it's just to echo that the support is out there from different organizations, and so users, and if you've got a confidant at work that you can trust, speak to them, because there might be someone that with more experience has done something like this before that will be able to give you the best approach on how to raise it. And it's very similar to whistleblowing. You know, if you recognize something that isn't good for the patient, then you want to do something about it. So it's the same principles really. So but just the other thing is, we should absolutely speak out, and there's organizations there to support you, pharmacist support as well, but just it can be emotionally quite taxing, so don't beat yourself up about it if you feel like you haven't got the confidence straight away to do so.
Definitely. And I'm going to hand it over to Elsie as well, because you've obviously spoken about stuff that's happened with you. So
yeah, I mean, one thing that I will tell you, it is a long, very, very lonely journey. But at the end of the day, I think it's about also integrity. I mean, I can tell you back in 2017, when this happened to me, my mother, my family, my husband, they begged me, Elsie, just let it go. And I let it go for one night. And when I wake up, I remember waking up about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, no, it's not happening. I don't know what the future will bring. I know it's going to bring lots of financial challenges. It's going to bring lots of emotional challenges. And it has been extremely tough, physically, mentally, in terms of relationship. It has been lonely. It has been like you banging my head against the wall, speaking to people and organizations that they don't want to hear. It has cost me thousands and thousands of pounds, but when I sit down and I reflect, Elsie, why are you doing this? I am doing it because I just don't want anyone else to have to go through the same thing. People tell me in that organization, oh, I wish you had told me that you were going to do this before you did it, because this has been done to other people in the past. So other people have to go through the same thing that I went through, and nothing happened. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened. So if I didn't speak up, if I don't take these people to the employment tribunal, the likelihood that it's going to happen again is there. It's going to happen again. It's about holding those people to account, because when is it going to stop? And I do not, for that, I am not saying you have to do it. I mean, as Mohammed say, it takes lots of courage. It takes, as Amandip said, do not think that you are less because you are not doing it. But if you are doing it, just be aware. You need to be aware what you're going to do it. Those people that maybe agreeing with you in the background, when it's time for them to speak up, they won't be supporting you. They won't be supporting you is the likelihood, because everyone is out there to for themselves. So this is it's an act. I think it's an act of courage, and I know it's self-inflicted, but you need to know why you are doing it. You need to know why you are doing it. And to me, it's about making sure that it's just not for me. I want accountability, but I also want to make sure that it's not something that will happen to someone else again.
Definitely. And I think it's an encouragement to us as students as well. Know why you're doing it. Know the reason behind why you're doing it. Not to say you shouldn't complain or you shouldn't go out and speak, but just know why you're doing it and why you won't give up in the process no matter what happens. And I think it was Mohammed that said this, have people around you who can encourage you. It's not always easy going by yourself. So have a good network of people. Not everybody you can network with in that sense, but just make sure you have the people who will support you. And in those places where you might not be present, they will back you up. Just going to revisit one of the other questions that was spoken, someone asked, and they were basically trying to say, it was about the pre-reg exam pass rate. And I'm going to read out what they said. So they said, the question was more to do with pre-reg pass rate and what can be done to change the fact that a good number of Black students are failing, not just within university, but the actual pre-reg. Like, what things do you guys think can be done? Obviously, it's a very complex matter, but what do you guys think can be done in terms of the actual pre-reg exam pass rate being less of a gap and more, yeah. So anyone feel free to unmute and give your opinions on that.
I mean, I have been trying to address this as well, and it all comes down to that experience, pre-registration, experience during that whole year, the support that you are receiving, and being able to address any problem from the very beginning. Often, these pre-registration students find that they are being used as another pair of hands, and they say absolutely nothing about it. They find that they don't have that connection and that support from the mentor of the team leader, and they say absolutely nothing about it. It is a responsibility for the students to speak about this, but it's also a responsibility from the General Pharmaceutical Council and from our regulators to put something in place that allow these students in a safe manner to talk about these experiences and for them to come in and address it. I mean, I have worked in hospital pharmacies for nearly, more than 20 years. I hardly see anyone from the General Pharmaceutical Council coming to talk to our students in the place of work. What is it like to being a pharmacist, a student in this organization? And I think more need to be done to ensure that the students are supported in the place of work. I remember when I was doing my pre-registration, one of the pharmacists was not going to be signed out. And this pharmacist has to fight, with the, at that time was the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and ask for support. And it was extremely difficult for them. And it was because there was no proper support channels for him to do this process. So I think most needs to be done from both sides, from the regulators, and hopefully this will change and allow the students and us to collect that information, because I think it's the whole year. That doesn't happen. You don't felt at the end because you didn't revise at the very end. It's because you were not supported, or you have not been properly guided through the whole year.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Aman.
So just picking up on Elsie's point about the support. So we are speaking to the GPHC and seeing what they can do, and there's looking at the tutors, so the pre-reg tutors and what support they have, because they are so fundamental. They're the role models in your pre-reg year. How are they supporting you? Because I'm sure if we broke this down, it's not an academic thing. Everyone's a very intellectual person. Everyone's passed their degree. They've got a master's degree. What's happening between them passing that undergrad degree and then looking at the exam? So it could be that there's elements that we're not considering. So like cultural pressures. From one of the Facebook lives that I did, we had someone called Noel, who's a pre-reg student, and he has financial considerations that he needs to take on because of he's a sole provider for his family, so that's going to impact on how much work he can do at home and the revision, and other things like that. So our pre-reg tutors culturally aware of the things that are going on in people's homes and taking that into account. And also then Health Education England, they pay for pre-reg placements for mainly hospital pharmacy, and we're asking them what are they doing, because they set standards. And is there something in there that they need to be making sure that it's mandated for students to get that support back in the workplace? If they're there to measure the quality, what are they doing about that? So it's speaking to those organizations to make sure that those things are there and accountable, because as soon as you make something mandated or in law, then you have to make sure that you're doing it. So how do we make sure those things are happening? And then looking at Oriel, again, do we need to look at the impact assessment? Why do more Black pharmacist students go to community, and what support are they getting in community pre-reg placement? So, there's bigger infrastructure in hospital. What can we do about community pharmacy? So it's having those conversations. And like you said, it's so multifactorial, but we need to kind of take each bit by bit and then look at how we can address them.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Naina.
Yes, I just want to say something as a professional advisor to independent community pharmacist employers that take on pre-regis. They do need to write a training plan that covers all the competencies that the GPHC demands. Whether they meet them, and I'm not even there to check whether they meet them, that's a different matter. So it's down to the students to speak up and say, the trainees to say that I'm not getting the support I'm needing. So I think it's a dual responsibility. Yes, the tutors need to be doing their bits, but the students need to be going back to them and saying, this is not something I'm getting help with. So yes, it would be good, and they can whistleblow to the GPHC. The community pharmacists are also getting paid for holding a pre-read student. So yes, they're accountable as well. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Back to Aman.
Sorry, I just wanted to add another point, that there is support out there. So, you know, we need to get better at advertising revision courses that are available, and support that pharmacy organisations have to offer. So we're out here, and we're also looking at, I know we've had feedback about, say, how costly things are, and you know, how do we make sure that people can afford to attend like our pre-reg exam. So we're also looking at things like that, but there is definitely support out there, and we'd probably need to work better with the universities and the training providers in getting that information out, that there's support out there for you to, you know, for you to access if, say, your pre-reg tutor isn't the most forthcoming person, but there's additional support there.
Thank you. And I think this just kind of links, sorry, this kind of links into what was asked earlier about when to speak up. I think these are the times where you would need to speak up, because, you know, we've done a degree for 4 years, and now one exam is determined if you actually qualify in this profession. This would be the time. And there's, like Aman said, there's so much support out there. So hopefully today's session was really helpful to you guys. I know it was helpful for me. I just got a few things left to say before we leave. So the BPSA is working very closely with pharmacist support. This is a QR code that links to our giving page where you can donate to pharmacy support, because this year all of our events are free. So feel free to scan that. And, you know, pharmacy support are a charity that are helping pharmacists and pharmacy students. So that's always a good point of contact whenever you have any issues, alongside all the other organisations that are there to help you. As well, before we end, we've got some other area events going on before the end of this year. So we've got the Northern Area Conference, which is on multiple sclerosis, and there's also the Western Area Conference, which is on chronic respiratory disease management. So I'd really encourage you guys to go to those as well, just because, you know, everything's online this year, so you have the ability to be involved in all the area conferences, which we naturally wouldn't be able to do if it was in person. And make sure to follow us on our social media. So at the BPSA on Twitter, at the BPSA on Instagram, and on Facebook as well, the British Pharmaceutical Student Association. In the coming weeks, you'll all get a certificate of attendance for coming today. And yeah, I think that's it for the event. So thank you to our speakers, Elsie, Aman, and Naina, and Mohammed, who had to leave early. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully you guys learned something today. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.